Students, today we'll study the major key terms of the chapter 2, that is globe, latitudes and longitudes. First term is globe. The globe is a model of the earth as it is, but in a very small and convenient form. We learned that globe is the true model of the earth, but in a small and convenient form which we can use for our study purpose. It shows all continents, countries and oceans labeled. That is, all the features of the earth which are present in actual are represented on the globe with proper labeling and according to a scale. Our second point is axis. The axis, it is an imaginary line about which the earth rotates once in 24 hours is called axis. We learned that the axis is an imaginary needle passing through the north and south poles of the earth, and the earth makes one rotation around its axis in 24 hours. It is not present in real but just an imaginary line to show the tilt of the earth. The earth is tilted at an angle of 23.5 degree on its axis. Next is poles. The true extreme points of the axis are called the poles. The true extreme points are the poles. That is, one of them is the North Pole and the other is the South Pole. Next is equator. The circle or the imaginary line passing through the center of the earth and perpendicular to the axis is called the equator. We studied in the chapter that the equator is an imaginary line running horizontally around the center of the earth, and it divides the earth into two hemispheres, one the northern hemisphere and the other is the southern hemisphere. Next is prime meridian. The circle passing through the Greenwich in Britain and perpendicular to the equator and parallel to the axis is called the prime meridian. We learned that the circle passing through the Greenwich circle, that means the imaginary line, vertical line running from north to south, which is passing through Greenwich, which is located in Britain, is called the prime meridian, and its value is taken to be 0 degree. Next is latitude. What is a latitude? One of the imaginary circles parallel to the equator is called latitudes. So all the imaginary lines running from west to east direction and parallel to the equator are called latitudes. The latitudes have their centers on one common line and they have different radii. We saw that as we move from equator to the poles, the length of the circle or the length of the latitudes decreases. Next is longitude. One of the imaginary circles parallel to the prime meridian is called longitude. The longitudes are the imaginary lines running from north to south direction and they are parallel to the prime meridian. The longitudes have their centers at the center of the earth and have the same radius as the earth. We learned that all the longitudes are of equal length, unlike the latitudes. Next is hemisphere. One of the two equal halves of the earth's spherical shape is called a hemisphere. Now we know that a ball is a sphere. If we cut the ball into half, we get two hemispheres. So what are hemispheres? They are the half of the spheres. If the earth is halved along the equator, we get the northern and the southern hemisphere. If we cut the globe along the equator. So then we get the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere. But if we cut the globe along the prime meridian, that is 0° longitude, we get the eastern hemisphere and the western hemisphere. Next is heat zones. Heat zones are the different zones of the earth where the sun's rays fall differently, thus causing different climate patterns. We learned that heat zones are different zones which receive varying amount of sun rays. These zones are called, we have 3 heat zones: torrid zone, which receives the maximum heat; temperate zones, which receives relatively less heat; and the 2 frigid zones, which receives the least sun rays, and that is why are very cold. Next is Greenwich. Greenwich is a place in the United Kingdom near London whose time is used as a standard all over the world. So the 0° longitude which is in Greenwich is taken as the standard time or the standard longitude for showing time all over the world. It is also called prime meridian. The prime meridian passes through this place, and so it is the place which divides the earth into eastern and western hemisphere. So we take this 0° longitude or the prime meridian as the reference. It divides the earth into eastern and western hemisphere. Next is standard time. Standard time of a country or region is the time regarded as a standard for that place, despite the fact that exists time difference geographically across that region. It is used only for convenience. So standard time of a local area or of a country means it is the standard time adopted for the whole country because of the longitudinal extent. Because of the longitudinal extent of the area, we adopt a standard time which is followed all over the country for our convenient purpose. That is all. Thank you.